So this section is SMP. And I say SMP, but it's really SMP/E. And I'll describe what that means in a minute. But high level, how do you install the operating system? How do you install IBM products? How do you put maintenance on the IBM operating system? How do you put maintenance on the IBM ZOS products? You use SMP. Think of it as a very elaborate utility. And I will tell you that when you're brand new and you have to install a product, I mentioned this earlier, you might get a tape in your hand with the product on it, and you get something called the program directory. The program directory tells you explicitly what you need to do with SMP to install it. You have to follow that program directory instructions explicitly because they that packaged it knows how it was packaged, so you follow their instructions to unpackage it and make it available. So you can get good at SMP by installing products and reading the program directory, and with a little bit of repetition, you start getting good and seeing what they're doing. So by the time we're done here, you'll be able to describe what SMP/E is. You'll be able to understand an important term called SYSMOD. You'll understand 4 different types of SYSMODs. You'll be able to describe the global zone. What does that mean? And what's a target in distribution libraries? And I want you to be able to list 4 SMPE commands for managing software maintenance. So SMP, it actually means System Management Program. That's what it stands for. It's a program or utility, and the SMP/E is extended. So it's a basic tool for installing and maintaining the software. So SMP controls these changes at what is referred to at the element level. It can select the elements to be installed, and you call a system and calling system utility programs to install the changes. And SMP also keeps records of everything that it has done. Typically, SMP is run in batch with JCL. However, there are panels under ISPF for doing ISPF work, for doing SMPE work. The panels get primarily used for inquiry. Most of the time when work is done, you really do it using batch. I want to introduce you to this term called a SYSMOD. So the combination of these elements and control information is called a system modification, SYSMOD. There are 4 types of SYSMODs. There's a function SYSMOD, and a function SYSMOD means you're introducing a whole function. And that could be a product. A function think of it as a whole product. But then there's other type of SYSMODs that actually are just fixes to the function SYSMOD. So you could have a PTF SYSMOD, and a PTF is basically a fix. There's another type of SYSMOD called an APAR. Well, an APAR is also a fix. The difference is that an APAR, you may have an emergency thing that you report. IBM accepts the fact that you got a problem. They immediately create a fix. They do a little bit of testing, not much, but you say, hey, if you think this will fix it, I'm going to put it on right now, even though you haven't thoroughly tested it with everything. That's called an APAR SYSMOD. A PTF SYSMOD, in contrast, is where they fully tested the fix. That's the difference. They're both fixes. This last one is offset, and it really should be over to the left. This is just a slide formatting issue. But the last type of SYSMOD is a user mod. A user mod is something you might code, and you locally could actually put this system modification on the system. It's also known as a user mod. So the four types of SYSMODs are function, TTF, APAR, and user. Those are the four types of SYSMODs. So SMP works with data sets, of course. You would expect that data is involved somewhere. And so some of the data sets that are involved, there's typically a data set known as the Consolidated Software Inventory. And I'm actually going to display some of those when we're done here and show you how you can typically find them on a system. And this Consolidated Software Inventory, typically known as the SMP CSI, really has control information in it, metadata. Well, there's other data sets. There's some data sets that belong to what's called the global zone. The global zone keeps information about the entire environment. The target zone, the global zone knows about the target zone, but some of the maintenance that you would put on would go through the global zone. Once the global zone knows about it, it can be applied to the target zone. The target zone is the metadata about the fixes and the target libraries. The target libraries is where the physical executables would go, or the physical macros. Sometimes they could be parameters, they could be ISPF panels, they could be any number of things that comes from IBM. It turns out that there is another zone called the distribution zone. In the distribution zone, you can think of it this way. When you first get the product, the function SYSMOD, and you lay it down, you have a global zone, you'll have a target zone, and a distribution zone. At that point in time, when you initially put everything in place and you've done the install, your distribution libraries and distribution zone and your target libraries, represented by the target zone, are in sync with each other. They're identical. So the distribution libraries has the distribution of the product. The target libraries is what the system uses to run on. So the target libraries have the executables that the system would use. I'm going to talk about the four main commands, the commands of SMPE. Receive, apply, accept, and restore. What a receive means, if you get a SYSMOD, and it can be electronically retrieved or on tape, and you get it from IBM, or it could be a user mod that you built yourself, you receive that SYSMOD. And when you receive the SYSMOD, it places it in the global zone. So the global zone says, I know about it. And after you receive it, because you could receive lots of things, and then when you do an apply, it takes it from the global zone. The target zone is the one really doing the apply, and those SYSMODs can be placed in a target library. Now, when you do the apply, and you have those, the system's ready to do something. Now, it is possible after let's take a fix. You receive a fix, you put it in the global zone, you apply the fix to the target libraries. At this point, after the fix is applied, it is only updated the target libraries. The distribution libraries have not been updated with that fix at this point. So here's a scenario. I do the apply, and what I want to do here is, let's say, for instance, I applied it, I'm running with it, and I realize, oh, I don't like what I applied here. That created me a bigger problem. I need to back that out. So what you can do is you can do a restore. And a restore takes what was in the distribution zone and overlays what was in the target zone and actually copies the distribution module into the target library area. So you've, in effect, backed it out with the restore command. Now, here's another scenario. You do the apply, and once you've done the apply, it goes to the target, and after a period of time, you can say, I trust those changes. I feel comfortable with them. Then you would do what's called an accept. At that point, those fixes go into the distribution library, kind of hardened. So if ever you do another fix and need to back that out, it would take what you trusted in the distribution. So those are the four commands: receive, apply, accept, and restore. And the flow down here is actually showing you some of the path for the receive, apply, accept, and restore. There are panels, and I can tell you that if ever you're working on a problem with IBM, and the first thing that you report that you've got an operating system problem and you get on the phone with IBM, first thing that's going to happen typically is the IBM support people are going to say, what level of the operating system are you? You tell them the level of the operating system. Now, you have a failing component of some kind. And you pretty much may know what the failing component is, or you're close to it. And so they may ask you, what is the maintenance level on a specific module that they've discovered is involved with this problem? Well, the way you can find out the specific maintenance level or the fixed level of that module, you can go, typically they'll go into these panels to look it up real quick. And it can actually tell them the fixed level of a particular module. So here I'm actually going to navigate the panels. I'm going to do a query to display the SMP CSI information. And then when you do that, you can actually hit enter and see all the different libraries. Now, in most cases, ignore the first four. That's MQ series. But here's the global zone. Here's the distribution zone, which is the D represented by DLIB, and the target. These data sets right here are the CSI Consolidated Software Inventory, which is the metadata about the environment. But the metadata is also going to include the target library names and the distribution library names and other information. Here's an example of running SMP in batch. Notice I'm executing program GIM SMP. So what do you surmise the three-character designation is for SMP? It's GIM. So if you see GIM messages, that's SMP. So this is running in batch, and that program, GIM SMP, it's actually looking for SMP CSI. That's what's hard-coded inside of there. Where's my CSI? Oh, your CSI is mbs.global.csi. Then I can say set boundary global. I want to look at the global zone, list the FMID set, and list all the functions. A lot of information is going to come back. And what I'm going to do is actually do a little bit of navigation right now, but I want you to know that if you want to learn more about SMP, the ABCs that I talked about on the first day, Volume 2, Chapter 5 has information on SMP, and then the SMP, does it have a separate bookshelf?
Yes.
Yeah, so ZOS, there's a ZOS SMPE bookshelf. And these are probably 3 of the best manuals, a user guide, a reference, and a commands. Also, you can do a Google search on those numbers and it'll come up. And remember what I mentioned, whenever you're doing installation of a product, an important artifact that comes with a product is something called the software product program directory. It ends up being the specific details you've got to follow to lay the product out. That's where that is. It's in a thing called a program directory. Also, the program directories are typically on the installation tape. A lot of people will, even though they've got a hard copy, they also, as soon as they read the tape, one of the files on the tape is the program directory, and they'll typically put that program directory right in the...
No more.
Oh, they don't. They quit doing that.
Program directories only come on DVDs now.
Ah, thank you. One of the SMP experts in the room, IBM has made a change. The program directory is on a DVD that gets shipped, and it's not on the tape.
PDF.
Thank you. Well, that makes it very difficult in a PDF to actually put electronically on the mainframe. Yeah. Okay, we'll leave it at that. Okay. Yeah. So, as I mentioned, some of the best books, the SMPE User Guide, Reference, and Commands. 3 of the best books. And remember, that red book.
There's a 4th book.
Oh, there is a 4th.
Called Packaging Guide.
Oh, right. And there, as the expert pointed out, there is a book called a Packaging Guide. That's if you package products. Now, that's where you would become more of a super duper SMPE expert.
It also helps people that are going to have to write user mods.
Right. And if you do have to write a user mod, you'll need to read the Packaging Guide. So that was a really quick explanation of SMPE. And now you can describe what a SYSMOD is and list 4 types of SYSMODs. Well, if I list those 4 types of SYSMOD, we got a function SYSMOD, that's the whole product, or the entire operating system. We can have a PTF, which is a fix SYSMOD. We can have an APAR, which also is a fix, but hasn't been thoroughly tested. And then we can have a user mod, which is also considered a type of SYSMOD. Describe the global zone. Well, the global zone is metadata, and you receive SYSMODs into the global zone to be held until you apply it to a target zone. Describe the target. Once you accept the fix, accepting means I'm going to make it permanent by making it available in the distribution zone and distribution libraries. Now, if you back out, you get whatever you've accepted. List 4 types of SMP commands. Well, receive, apply, accept, and restore. And restore is for a back out. Are there other commands? Yeah. You already saw one, list. There's things you can do once you read the commands book. But I want you to be aware of those 4 commands for managing and actually for managing the software maintenance and getting it into the system and making it available to the system.
Whole data, like you were talking about, whole data era actually keeps the PTF that you're trying to install from going on. You run an apply check, and if there's a whole error against that PTF, SMP reports that I can't install this because it's got a APAR against it, so it won't go on.
Right, and I hope you could hear Larry. His voice carries fairly well. He said that the hold data has like hold for errors, and if it encounters a PTF number, it will prohibit you from putting it on because we know it's an error. Okay, what I'm going to do before we start this next section, I'm going to look at I'm going to get the SMP panels. And oh, by the way, you're able to do this too, but you can't. Don't worry about hurting anything because you can't. The libraries that we're reading through these panels are in a read-only state, so you can't modify them anyway. So what you can do, if you were at the primary option menu, which I'm going to get to here in a second, one of the panel options is SMPE. So if you want to try this yourself, you can. You go into SMPE, and oh, by the way, if you get this, that just means, oh, it's the first time I've been in on this ID, and then I hit enter, and it gives me more information. Well, I don't need all this information. It's just telling me things. Oh, it might be good to go through this if you want to learn. And it's just giving me a tutorial on it. But if I do F3, it puts me in my SMPE primary option menu. Now, there's many things I can do here. Let's say, for instance, I want to do a 3 query. Now, what will happen is it says, well, where's my SMP CSI? Before I show you the SMP panels, I want to tell you something about most people's systems. I'm going to get out of this. I'm going to go to the 3.4 panel. Now, the SMP CSI for the global zone, it's a VSAM data set. And so you might go into a brand new system and you may say, where are your CSIs? And most of the time, you can find the CSI by up on 3.4, just go ***.CSI. Because many people, the low-level qualifier is just CSI. So if you hit enter on this, it does a fairly extensive search through the catalog system, and it's going to tell you every data set that has a CSI. Now, in our case, we take different products and we put them in different CSIs. So the individual products have its own global and distribution and target. So this here represents the global, the target, and distribution CSIs. And there's many of them. So we do it for individual products. But the way we handled in our case, you'll see these different products here. They all have their own global, target, and distribution CSI. But for the operating system, this is what we've used. We used MVS in our case. So if I want to look at the operating system, here's the CSI I want, mvs.global.CSI. And it's a VSAM data set. It's got a data component and an index component. So if I take that, put it on my clipboard, go to SMP3 Query. Now right here, I can paste that name. Now I could have many names in this list in case I want to switch back and forth. And if I had a bunch of them in the list, I could just select the one I want to use. Right now there's only one. So now it's going to do a query on that. And different things I can do here. Let's say I want just a, I don't know what I'm doing, I'll do a CSI query. Well, what do you want to look at? Give me a zone name, give me a zone type, give me a zone entry. I don't know what zone name, type, and entry name. I'll just hit enter. So now it comes back and says, well, at least give me, do you want to look at the global zone, the distribution zone, or the target? Let's look at the global. So these are different things inside the global. We keep all of our function SYSMODs in here.
That's where the SYSMODs are in the global zone.
Yeah, we want here.
Your G zone tells you the MIDs.
Thank you. So this particular type, the G zone, these are the function SYSMODs, entire things that are part of the base in our case. So these are your function SYSMODs. But what you can do to look at some of the fixes, let's do this. Let's look at the target zone. These list a whole bunch of types, and as you can see, there's lots of types, but I want SYSMOD type. So what we could do, if we know what we want, I could say the zone name, MVST, that's the target. The type, give me SYSMOD. The name, I don't know, give me all SYSMODs. Here's the SYSMODs, and they get identified with these funny incremented numbers, but let me go to the bottom here. I'm going to find let's take this one. And this IBM just comes up with a name, but if I were to select the SYSMOD, once again, I'm in the target, and it said, oh, not a whole lot of information here, because this SYSMOD, which was probably a PTF, was souped by this. So that superseded it. So let's go look at that one. Oh, we got to do a select or locate. And if we look at that, it says, oh, okay, that's SYSMOD. It was a type PTF. It went against this function, SYSMOD. The status is applied. And it was done on, wow, that's pretty old. So it's been around for a long time. 1996. So it's been been part of the base for a long time. Must be rock solid. These were the prerequisite fixes that had to be on for it. And any modules or macros that were involved with it. So if someone says, well, also what we can do with that SYSMOD, we can determine what things were involved. Now, another thing we could do, let's say, for instance, I'm on the operating system, and there was a module involved with a problem. We're going to pick one here. I go into SysOne Link Live, where some system modules are, and I pick one of them. And let me get something. The three characters, those are the products. Let's go into locate IE. Okay, let's take this one, IEA VES39. That's an executable module. If I were to select it, it's an executable module, and many times people know that there's eye catchers inside of here that you can look at the physical module and get some information out of it for the eye catchers. But I can go to SMPE, and let me find some information about that module. So probably the fastest way to navigate is probably do a query on it, CSI Query. And we assume this is a load module, LMOD, because there's different things, there's different entry types other than SYSMOD, because the SYSMOD may have had that module inside of it. So I want to look for a load module, and it was that. So it comes back, and it told me, oh, that's in Link Live, and really doesn't have much information on it. Not sure we can find what
shows you the last update of MID on the right.
So it was just part of the base, and we haven't put any fixes on it, essentially.
Right, it's been there for a long time.
Been there for a long time. I picked one where there's been no fixes applied to it. But if there were fixes applied to it, we would see it here.
Also, if there was JCLN, you would have an L option that you could display the JCLN for that load module.
Yeah, so it keeps all that metadata, a lot of information about how that load module was built. But in this case, I just happen to pick a module that has been rock solid for a long time, no fixes against it. But if there were fixes against it, we would get much more metadata information in here about the last update and everything else. Another thing I want to point out in SMPE here is let me do another query, 3, and do a source ID query, and I'll do it against the target. And you'll actually see different names inside of here. And one thing that you have in here is groups of fixes. Like we put on new hardware. And when we put on new hardware, there was a group of fixes for the hardware. Those were the fixes we needed for the hardware. If I select one of them, it actually tells that this was souped by this, but involves this macro of the operating system, and it tells me when it was applied, late 2011. But other things, other type of source IDs that are in here are source IDs known as puts. These puts used to come out once a month. Now they come out, they still come out once a month. And typically what people will do is they'll label the put tapes by the year and the month. So the person that's also speaking here is the one that does all this. And if I were to look at his last put tape, I assume your last put tape is 1304, which is the
2013 fourth tape of the month.
fourth tape of the year in 2013. So we get regular maintenance, and it's an accumulation of fixes. So if I look on this put tape had all these fixes on it. So let's pick one. So this one actually involved those modules. In those modules, I happen to know ADR has to do with DFSMS and a utility called DFP, or DSS, thank you, it's DSS. And we actually know that here's when it was applied, and here's all the modules. Now in this case, you may say, well, that's a module, and I want you to know a module is not a load module. For example, let's just look at this piece right here. This is an element. Would that be correct? This is considered an element, the mod? It's an element. So let me explain an element to you. Elements can be any number of things. So if I take this element and I go back to the beginning and query, CSI query, and I'm going to do mod. And then, and enter, you'll see that that mod was part of this load module. That load module, DFDSS, is what we use for a lot of DASD management things. So if I were to take that load module, you would see that the entire load module itself includes many mods. All it says is this.
Right.
And one reason is, and right here is the last updated fix to it. But what it includes is a bunch of mods. Now,
if you enter L up there, you'll see it.
Here is, Larry's pointing out, if I enter L on the command line to display the link edit data,
You'll get more information.
you get a little bit more information. It's including other things, but inside of here is a lot of mods. You don't see all the mods because one L mod can have many mods. Oh, by the way, also, I talked about this the other day. Authorization code 1, it has to be in an authorized program library. A lot of security goes on to this and a lot of procedural steps. AC1 means that this executable module has the potential of doing a mode set key 0 and go into supervisor state, mode equals soup. And when you're in key 0, you can do a lot of things. So there's a lot of protection around that. So it's a very protected module. And usually only the disk administrators use this module.